Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the newly renovated Snowdon Delicatessen. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette and Leslie Chesterman and our special guest today, Mario Polese. Mario, thank you for being here. For people who don't know,
it's a pleasure.
Professor Emeritus at the Institute of National Research. You also were involved in the reason we're going to talk to you today as part of a panel put together by the Quebec Community Groups Network to study the, quote, and I'm using it in quotes, apparent decline, unquote, of the French language. So that's what we want to get into today, because after that, the government came out with its action plan on the French language just about a month later. So let's begin with that use of the word apparent. You study this, you've been studying this for a long time. Is the decline, as the government suggests, apparent, or is it real? And is that a question you can answer?
Yes, I can answer the question, and I think both are right. Okay, you know what Churchill used to say, Churchill, one of his famous quotes is, there are statistics,
lies,
dime statistics, and lies. So if you look at the statistics, you can choose the statistic which you want, and you will come to the conclusion you want. If you already have a foregone conclusion, you'll get there. If you look at the data, if it may be technical, for mother tongue language spoken in the home, yes, there is a decline. If you look at other data, like language used by merchants, when you go shopping, the situation is stable. You can pick the data you want, and you'll get to the conclusion you want. The point that I want to make here is that it's not simply put yourself in the shoes of francophones. It's not simply a matter of question of statistics. Most people don't look at the statistics, but it's what you feel around you. Okay, and I think we've all lived through this digital globalization change in the last 10, 20 years. English has become the language of everything. It's all over the place. I look at my own children and grandchildren. My two grandchildren in this neighborhood go to a French school, but they quack in English as well as in French. They watch on the internet, they're more in English than in French. I mean, the English culture, English has become the language of everything.
Sorry, but do you
so there's a
speak
feeling
French at home?
among the francophones, and I would say not even in Quebec, it's a universal francophone thing, that the French language is again, after going up after Bill 101, after there was clearly an upsurge in the position of French, that it's again being threatened. But I think it's less a matter of cold statistics than the use of English in general, the place of English in general in society. And the feeling one has is that Francophone or Anglophone, you can't live without English anymore. And that's a new reality which didn't exist, for example, at the time of Bill 101. I remember when I was young, I learned French and started learning French in high school in New York. I grew up in New York. And at that time, French was still a very prestigious language. All the avant-garde theaters in New York had French films. It was in to speak French. It's no longer in to speak French. French is no longer a cool language internationally. And I'll stop there. But so part of the problem is when something you can't even seize it. It's just it's a feeling. And all the different surveys which have been done by Léger or others, which ask francophones, do you think the French language is threatened? They always show that it's going up and up and up. So there's this feeling that the language is threatened.
Well, one of the most telling statistics came out that said 98% of people in
public places,
places spoke French, were able to speak French in conversations. And a lot of Anglo groups grabbed onto that as saying, well, obviously something is good here. But yet on the other level was that there was more acceptance of bonjour, hi on a certain level, which was detrimental. So what's the story?
I think the government is almost at a dead end, to the extent that Quebec, as it always has tried to do, is to respect the rights of the English community, English school system, English universities, despite all the current stupidities in general. I mean, the English community has its institution. Without touching that, and I don't think anybody wants to go there, even, the PQ never said we want to abolish the rights of the English. How do you balance that? You know? And I think that the current government, or any future government, doesn't really know where to go, which is also explains why they do stupid things, like the thing with that. With there are the English the tuition in McGill.
Well, and $630 million to stop the decline.
Yeah, so I mean the data is clear. It's clear the English universities. That's no big surprise. Are favored because they have a much bigger audience, for recruits. So how do you get? Yeah. How do you What do you do? What do you do?
But see, to your point though, it would seem to me, as you just described it, this is not a matter of Anglos in Quebec versus Francophones.
No.
If you look at it, as you said, of English now being the cool language, it's everywhere. The internet has kind of taken us there.
I couldn't agree with you more.
You can't provincially say, well, you know what? Unless you say you can't get the internet anymore, and our kids don't have access to it, where's there a solution in there?
But that's what I just said. I think if you have some good ideas, I'd like to hear them.
Yeah,
and this is universal
and I
too,
think that the Quebec government, and it's nobody's fault, has sort of hit a wall. I think they've gone about as far as they can go in promoting French with legislation. That's why I think the point in the Gazette this morning was a good point, is can the English community, once it is sensitized to this challenge, because we are let's call the happy inheritors of this world language. Okay? We don't have to learn it. I mean, we already speak it. Okay? So what should we do? I mean, I think we have. Part of it is going back to the school system. Unfortunately, I have no personal experience with the English language school system, but I'm not sure that the kids coming out, I'll go back, I'm sorry, I remember, some month ago when we had the debate on the cégeps. Okay. At one point, a spokesman for the English school system came out very strongly saying, no, we can't impose those French courses on kids coming out, because about a third of the students coming out of the English system wouldn't be able to survive in that system, which I sort of was taken aback. I says, how come kids coming out of the Quebec school system don't speak French? It doesn't have to be their first language, but how come they don't learn it? So I think that's one direction to go in, but to go even, yes, go.
No, I'm just going to say that's interesting too, because I just read a little while ago, kids in the French system, perhaps right up until CEGEP, most of them then want to go to English CEGEPs. They don't want to continue in French. It's kind of like they've been, for lack of a better word, trapped in a French system, and now that they can go and decide what to do, they want to go into English CEGEPs, and the government worries about that too.
So what do you do?
That's what you're here to figure out.
I'm not in government. You're supposed to be the,
Well, what is it? What's a potential solution here? I mean, is it making sure that everyone goes to school in French?
Well, I wouldn't be against an integrated school system, which would be, let's say, predominantly French, but everybody would learn excellent English. In fact, in the neighborhood, I have neighbors who are good Anglos, and they've sent their kids to the French school system, and they're not dead either. Look at me, my kids. I speak English we switch between English and French. They went to the French system. They're not dead. So, if the French system were really of lower quality, then that might be a problem. But it's not. I mean, all the data coming out of the PISA tests from the OECD show that indeed we're lucky. They're one of the best school systems, despite all our complaints, probably on the planet. Okay, our students always come out on top on both the French and the English system, compared even to Americans, to Brits and to others. So the French system is a good thing. But I would like in quotes, an integrated bilingual system with French predominant. That would be the ideal solution, but I don't see us going that way. I don't see us going.
One of the issues that has been brought up is that certain government people wish that at home the language
mother
goes,
tongue.
the mother tongue, regardless of mother tongue, people should be speaking French at home. I mean, we understand the need in the public to speak French, fine, but how do you convince like Anglos or Italians or Greeks or
Yeah,
whatever?
by the way, to Bill's point, they use that as a bit of a weapon, right?
Yes.
To say, look at this mother tongue, not where it should be, therefore
well,
French
it's
is
a
in
statistic.
decline.
I think there's a misunderstanding there of what statistics are about. These are not normative. This is not a thing that you should do. It's statistics, which indicates how things are going. It doesn't. There's no thing in there says the government says you have to speak Hungarian or French or Dutch at home. It's an indicator which statisticians use to see where things are going. Okay, the language one speaks at home is a very good indicator what the language of the kids will be, what their mother tongue will be in the next generation. I'm a very good example. I married a French Canadian. Okay, I could have imposed English in the home. She spoke good English too, but we decided between both of us that French would be the home language, the predominant one. She said, we speak English sometimes too. So French became the mother tongue of my kids. Okay, it's not a. It shouldn't. People have misinterpreted it as something which the government gets into. No, it's a statistics. It's a statistics that tells you how the language is evolving. Okay, that's for example in the case of Montreal, you have a much higher proportion of people. You can go and look at it. People speaking English at home, then people have it as a mother tongue, and that's an indicator. Okay, that those future kids will have English as their mother tongue. The proportion is also higher for francophones too. People are also Francisizing too, but it's an indicator. It's not a policy.
So to your point just a minute ago, and I think this point has been made as well by the QCGN, Anglophones have always been perceived as the enemy here. At least that's how we feel, right? Because we're not doing
Correct.
enough to speak French wherever we go. Is the solution here, or the suggestion here, that the one thing we can do as Anglophones here to try to, I don't know, appease the government or do our part is to what? Speak French wherever we can?
Well, that's what I've done, and I said I'm not dead. I don't consider. I read generally read everything in English. We watch everything on English on Netflix and Prime. So yes, I've generally, not always, but generally used French as my public language. When I go into a store, I say bonjour. If I see the other person only speaks English, well, I'll switch to English. And of course, if I run into friends on the street who I know are English speaking like me, we speak English. And if I go, I was also an adjunct professor at McGill. Of course, in McGill, if I'm on the campus, I speak English. I don't speak Hungarian. But as in public, when I go into a store, when I say hi to the bus driver, I say it in French. That's all.
So there's no bonjour hi for you. You're a bonjour guy.
Yeah, I prefer bonjour. Bonjour hi doesn't really disturb me either because I think it's sort of cute.
Yeah.
But I think bonjour hi is sort of cute. I'm not as upset about it as some francophones would be. No, because even there it's clear that it's bonjour hi. It's
And
not
it's
hi. It's
Not
not
hi bonjour. Yeah.
It's not hi bonjour or just hi. Okay. So bonjour doesn't really upset me that terribly because it's also. Fortunately, it's a reality. Montreal is a city where the two languages are and will always be spoken. Okay, and that's it's a simple reality.
I think the government sometimes feels that's something they'd like to get rid of, where French is the
Well,
only
they can.
language.
So that's the challenge. How? And this now I throw this open to, other Anglophones is how can we ensure that English remains an active language in Montreal while it's still making sure that French is the dominant language. Maybe the two are incompatible. I haven't figured it out. Maybe the two are incompatible. It's if you look at the legislation in Europe, whether it be Switzerland or Belgium, two places I've taught and I know, the European solution, with some exceptions in general, is to separate. Is to have a clear wall between the two languages. A situation like Montreal, where the two languages sort of meet each other, or to put it even more bluntly, are in competition, doesn't doesn't really exist in Europe. In Europe, in Belgium, they were so radical in Belgium between Dutch and French, at the demand mainly of the Flemish nationalists, that you don't even have a language census anymore. Okay. It simply says this side of the world is totally Dutch speaking and this side is totally French speaking.
And there's a lot of animosity between them.
And there's a lot of them. I know it well. I was in Leuven in Dutch, when the French university was expelled from Flemish territory. It's as if the Quebecois here had decided to expel McGill to Kingston, Ontario.
Right.
That's what the Flemings did.
In the article you referred to in the Gazette today, Eva Ludwig from the Quebec Community Group was talking about, instead of alienating Anglos in the process of protecting French, having them join in and recognizing the contributions the Anglo community has made, over the years, and let them join into the process rather than keeping them at bay.
But you said that's. I'll repeat your word. Join in. So join in. That's exactly my point. Join in.
But I don't
But
think
also
this government would ever consider even doing that.
No.
Yeah.
I'm talking to the Anglophones. Join in.
Yeah,
I mean, it's.
but the impression they get is that they're not wanted to join in.
Yeah.
How would you like them to do that? Come up with a Union Jack and say, we love the English? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, but I think on the other side too, there are a lot of English people who are not joining in. I mean, I'm somebody who's completely joined in, but I do know a lot of people, even my age, who don't speak French well, who live amongst. There are groups of English people who do not join in, and
I know.
and it goes both ways. That's the problem in our
Yeah.
city.
but so, no, I wish I had the solution. So far, I think we're living in a miracle because there are very few places on this planet, okay, where you have two great cultural communities, or you might even say two civilizations, which live side by side without killing each other.
Yeah, right.
Okay, you
Right.
just open the newspapers and you'll see how difficult it is for people of different cultures to live together.
Yep.
Okay? I'm of Austrian origin. My mother tongue is German. So my background is the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was a multinational empire, which totally exploded. Once Bratislava, before Pressburg, was a trilingual city, one language. The Germans in Prague, bye-bye. I mean, it's...
So you're-
and I remember still going to Sarajevo, where the three peoples live together today. There's only one of them left. So, I mean, Montreal, in that sense, is
Kind of unique.
Is unique. We haven't killed each other off yet, or at least we're not separated with walls like the Protestants, Catholics in Belfast. Okay, so far we've been doing it pretty well.
The Russians and Ukrainians, there's another great example.
Russians and Ukrainians, but the thing is, so far when you think of it, with the exception of the October crisis, we have 200 years of two great civilizations living next to each other and basically getting along, which doesn't mean that we don't have tensions. Our little talk here is an example of that, but how can we keep up doing that in this new world where English is totally dominant? How do we do it?
So I would ask the question that, to Leslie's point of, some Anglos not wanting to join in or have not joined in, in this new action plan that the government has put forth, there's money set aside to teach temporary immigrants, foreign workers, French. And I've always wondered, why doesn't the government, or why hasn't the government, if they want Anglos to feel like they're part of this and want them to join in, made French courses available to anyone and everyone who would like to learn better French and bear the cost of that, which they haven't done.
Maybe you haven't read the main law, or I've misinterpreted. I thought that was already in the law. That indeed is in the law, that the French courses are open to anybody.
No, but I'm saying to make them, if I want to take that French course, I have to pay to take that French course. If you want people to speak French who are Anglos and they'd like to do it, why should they bear the cost of having to do it as opposed to the government? It benefits the government at the end of the day. Why not make it available to
Well, I
everyone?
have to look more at the law, but I agree that, the French courses should be open to everybody. To what extent all the taxpayers should pay for it is a good debate. To what extent should, because I feel if I learn it, it's a gain for me too. So maybe I should put in some money too. I mean, anybody who learns French here, I think it's also a gain for them. But maybe you're right. Maybe let's do. It's a nice debate. 50-50 financing, where the government picks up half the bill.
There was an article in Le Devoir a couple of days ago by Christian Rioux, who is so pro-French that he actually lives in Paris.
I know.
And yes, you know who he is. And it started off by saying the tragedy that Céline Dion apparently speaks to her kids in English at home.
Yeah,
I thought that was ridiculous. They live in Las Vegas. They don't, of course, live in Quebec.
That's what my wife said too when she saw the show.
Ridiculous.
Obviously, she speaks English to them.
Of course, but the cusp of that story was that he was talking about that bilingualism actually is the route to killing off French. That it's not just about preserving French; it's about discouraging bilingualism because that will lead. A lot of people who are trying to stop the decline of French believe that even people being bilingual will lead to the kids saying they'll just switch to English eventually over a couple of generations, like Céline Dion. Eventually, French just goes out the window. What are the statistics on that?
Well, bilingual is such a loaded term. Who can be against bilingualism? Of course.
Christian Rioux.
But no. But on the other hand,
But
let me finish. On the other hand, in much of the nationalist francophone community, bilingualism is a dirty word. Okay, and that can be understood too. Go out, look at all the places where French and English, without any protection by law, we're the only ones here. French has it. What happens? Indeed, English wins out. When you look at the proportion of francophones who still speak French at home, whether it be in Ottawa, Sudbury, Moncton, or any other city which has a major francophone outside of Quebec, the data is clear. Their bilingualism is leading to assimilation. Okay. Thus, for many nationalist francophones, the word bilingual is a dirty word. I don't think so. But again, there we come back to the challenge. How can Montreal remain de facto bilingual while still making sure that French is the dominant common language? Maybe the two are impossible. But I repeat, we've been doing it for 200 years. Okay. We've been doing this balancing act for 200 years. Maybe we'll find the magic solution. So far, again, I said it seems to be working. The majority, unfortunately not more, of the Anglophone community does also speak French.
Right, and the government's going to be throwing a lot of money at the problem, $603 million that was announced this week. How can that money help?
Well, I agree with my colleague
with
here.
Aaron.
One of the first things is to increase the capacity of French learning for people who don't speak French. Because to me it seems obvious, but not obvious. The ideal is that everybody in Quebec can at least speak French.
But
also, maybe that's more idealistic, is that they also feel a certain commitment to the French language.
Right.
That it's part of our heritage as Quebecers. It probably is the prime, let's put it, attribute, trait, which makes us a different society in North America. And do we like living in this society? Do we want this society to feel secure? If so, well, then French is also part of our heritage.
Well, but we should point out that a lot of changes have happened within the English community when you go back to, the 60s and the 70s, when there was a huge wave of Anglos who left here.
Yeah.
But those who stayed, for the most part, have wanted to join in. And I point out that prior there was French immersion, of course, that a lot of Anglos took advantage of. But prior to that, when some of us grew up, we weren't even allowed to attend French schools. I mean, it's very difficult to join in if you're not even allowed to. If you weren't Catholic, you went to Protestant school board, regardless of.
No, I think for the older populations, which prior to Bill 101, you can't. I don't expect them to all of a sudden change their viewpoint. I remember those times. I remember. Since I remember when I was working in the Eastern Townships in the 1960s, and in Milton, which we used to call Westmount on the Lake.
Right.
Right.
And since I've gone into Anglophones and I said, why? How come you don't speak French? And the answer I'm going to get, why should I learn it? Why should I learn French? These people don't even speak French. It's a patois which even the French don't understand, which was not totally wrong. Those type of Anglos don't, I think, have disappeared.
Right.
That was then.
That is absolutely true.
Has
Yes.
disappeared. But I'm saying for the older generation, of course, But that's why I go back to the school system. Our kids should not just learn French, but also feel that that's a language in which they have a stake also. That's it. I mean, look, on the positive side, I live here in this neighborhood. I live in NDG, and I go to Provigo on Monkland, and I personally don't even know which language, which is the mother tongue of the kids who serve me. They go back between French and English. And often then when I speak to them speak to each other, I realize that they're Anglophones. But when they serve me in French without an accent. They speak Quebecois like everybody else.
And I hear you say this, and I think to myself, that's fabulous. That's what makes Montreal, Montreal.
Exactly.
I say that to a francophone, and they say that's terrible.
Yeah.
Well, not all francophones.
Well,
yeah,
no.
but
The nationalists anyway.
Yes,
obviously,
absolutely.
No. I mean, no. I mean, if you see, to put the pressure down. I mean, the surveys also tell us that the percentage of Quebecers who are for independence of a referendum today hasn't budged in the last 20 years. It's still down to a third. So if the Francophones majority were so mad and so anti-English, then it would be up there in the 60s.
Fair point.
Right.
Yeah. So, I live mostly within the Francophone communities, and I don't feel, well, that's part of the miracle, I don't feel any animosity towards Anglophones. Everybody's worried about the invasion of English, that's for sure. I've never heard any animosity towards Anglophones. So it's you have to distinguish between this problem of English around everywhere, English. You feel your culture threatened, and animosity towards people. I haven't felt it, fortunately.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Want to thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And we will see you again soon in the next edition of the Corner Booth Podcast.